President Mubarak felt he had done his job after the constitutional amendments were made. He believed that the process of change should now happen naturally and gradually, without needing an elite group or political leadership to implement it.
No sooner had the formality of Mubarak's re-election occurred than Egypt's parliamentary ballots took place. With the fast-rising star Jamal Mubarak responsible for molding the NDP's election policy, members of the party were confident of securing a large majority.
Even with the interference, the vote rigging and all the illegal tactics that were resorted to, the National Democratic Party only gained around 23% of the votes, meaning that had the voters been left to their own devices, the party would have done much worse. I can say from a truly objective perspective that the NDP is not at all popular.
This unpopularity was brought home by the elections when candidates from the banned Muslim Brotherhood group, standing as independents, won an historic 88 seats. For them, it was a significant achievement in the decades-long battle with the Egyptian government since their organization's founding in 1928.
The relationship between Mubarak's regime and the Muslim Brotherhood started quite leniently. However, by the 90s, we were back again to being pursued and sentenced in military tribunals.
The movement arose in the small city of Ismailia, but it soon spread despite facing regular crackdowns. By 2005, its message struck a chord with many of Egypt's devout, who for centuries have turned more towards religion in times of need. Some look to the Muslim Brotherhood in a desperate plea for any form of political change, having lost faith in a regime which failed to offer them a better life. Even some Coptic Christians, a religious minority in Egypt, began to vote for them.
Some Copts said that they felt closer to the Muslim Brotherhood than to the current regime. They felt that they weren't given any rights anyway, and chose to give the group a chance, certain that they would never be as oppressive as the current government.
And yet, with the announcement of the 2005 elections, some Egyptians dared to dream that things may finally change. However, such hopes were extinguished before the year was out, as hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood members were arrested. Meanwhile, Ayman Noor, who had come a distant second to Mubarak in the presidential elections after securing 500,000 votes, also languished in jail after being accused of fraud.
This is the problem with the government in Egypt. They think that if they put a silencer on the murder weapon, then they are not murderers, as long as people do not hear any noise. And they use any legal charge or court case as the silencer.
But it's more difficult to silence those who hear the court cases. And when a group of judges staged a demonstration in downtown Cairo over government attempts to control their judicial authority, they roused huge support amongst the Egyptian people. The authorities reacted swiftly. The protests were brutally suppressed.
There are 1.7 million people working for the Interior Ministry, 850,000 officers and soldiers, 450,000 state security forces, 400,000 secret police. So there's a policeman for every 37 citizens. This is a president who's relying on an internal army in addition to the army itself. This isn't a gentle power, it's an aggressive one.
And yet, despite the best efforts of all the president's men, protests continued to erupt. By late 2006, another group was taking the lead as laborers held demonstrations against falling standards of living.
People are no longer able to make do, even though they used to manage, somehow. But the uprising by groups like the laborers, who aren't known to protest and who are normally very scared of the police, showed that something has happened which has made them overcome their fear.
In December 2006, one of the largest demonstrations took place in Mahalla, north of Cairo. 35,000 laborers stormed the Ghazal Mahalla factory, halting production at one of the largest textile producers in Egypt. The protesters insisted that they would not return to work until they received pay rises. In a rare success for the common man in Egypt, their employers, the government, eventually gave in to their demands. Labor disputes soon spread across the country, with support swelling among the Egyptian public, who were hearing their own problems being voiced. The mood was infectious. Protests are no longer restricted to the laborers. Disgruntled government employees have also stood up to the system.
The barrier of fear was destroyed. I think the credit mainly goes to the independent media, whether television or printed press. These played a vital role in getting the Egyptians to overcome their fears.
The growing popularity of electronic media was making life more difficult for the government censors.
Blogs offered the opportunity to give voice to the voiceless. At the beginning, they were only reaching people who had access to the internet. But it all expanded after that, and bloggers were able to influence public opinion and to force traditional media to report on the news they published.
Alongside new media, a more conventional art form was joining the battle. Historically, Egyptian cinema had provided a release for the masses, and its influence had spread throughout the region. But in 2007, the tone changed when director Khalid Youssef released two major films, Until Things Get Better and It's Chaos. The first revealed the harsh reality of life in Cairo's shanty towns. The second film was inspired by scandalous cases of police abuse, personified in the film by a sadistic and mentally ill police officer. Both films were instant hits.
The two films complement and complete each other. Life in Egypt has become very arbitrary. Our way of thinking and of taking political decisions has become random. Success and failure have become random. Even death has become random. People are walking the streets with no real direction or purpose. What we're addressing is the randomness that we're living in, which could be the beginning of chaos.
These fictional scenes were soon to be mirrored by real events in the streets of Egypt. In April 2008, rioters marched in Mahalla, the same Nile Delta city which had been the setting for the largest labor demonstrations just over a year before. This time, defiance reached a new level, and it was chaos. Security forces attacked and arrested dozens of demonstrators, many of whom weren't even born when Mubarak came to power.
Young people are really starting to lose hope. Their loyalty toward their country has been shaken because they have no guarantees of what will happen after they struggle with their studies and graduate. They don't know how they will live, if they will find a job, how much they will earn, if they will be able to afford to get married or buy a flat.
An increasing number of Egyptians are risking their lives as they escape their country as illegal immigrants. Some are even heading to Israel, once its greatest enemy, as a sign of anger towards their homeland, which can no longer provide for them. For many of those who remain, living standards continue to deteriorate. The main concern now is their daily bread. Even that has become hard to come by.
So many Egyptian writers, journalists, intellectuals think that a revolution is around the corner. I don't adhere to this view. I think the Egyptian people are very slow to revolt. They are not a revolutionary nation at all.
Meanwhile, President Mubarak drifts serenely into old age, spending many of his days in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, leaving behind him all the problems of the capital, the noise, the crowds, and the Egyptian people themselves. But he presides over a country that bears little resemblance to the one he was born in more than 80 years ago.
We encourage criticism in this society as we strive for democracy. I personally raised with President Mubarak the issue of the red line some journalists have crossed, and he assured me that reform will come with experience and that none of them would be imprisoned while he is in rule.
The reality turned out to be rather different. Prison sentences were recently handed out